We're experiencing some technical difficulties.
Welcome to TacoBagel. Dun, 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 dun. Welcome.
Hi, y'all.
Thank you for tuning back in.
We've been gone for a minute, we know, but now we're back.
Oh, look. Hey, we're officially back. Welcome to TacoBagel.
Yes, hello, welcome back.
I am Taco. My name's Michelle.
And I am Bagel. My name's Steph.
And today we are going to be having a very special episode around Cinco de Mayo. And exactly what Cinco de Mayo is and what the celebration represents, and how in some ways it's been commodified and it really just changed into American consumer culture.
Mm-hmm.
So we're really excited. It's been a couple of weeks.
It's been a minute.
Actually,
it's been a minute.
It might have been like 3
It's almost a month.
Yeah.
I have been away on business.
Actually, Steph is a local celebrity, a Midwest celebrity.
I am a Midwest celebrity, except for I spent none of my time except for like the last 3 days of this tour on the Midwest.
Yeah. And like she gets paid to like go to places and talk about shit that I don't get paid to talk about. We just come on TacoBagel and talk about it for free.
True.
So yeah, I am really excited because today is a special day.
Yeah.
It's Cinco de Mayo.
Otherwise known as Assorted Racism Day.
Right. And I've worn my little apparel for the special occasion. But
I wore blue.
Oh yeah, this is really beautiful though.
That is, it's really pretty.
I like the pattern.
It's very nice.
But yeah, we're gonna talk a little bit about the history.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna go into kind of what the holiday actually is about, and what it represents. It's got an anti-imperialist roots.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of like an underdog story in there.
We're gonna roast some white people.
Yeah. We're gonna talk about how white people were not shit. Yeah. Specifically the French.
The French are terrible.
Yeah. The French were the main villains of this story.
Or as they might say, les bad.
Les bad?
Les bad.
Oh my gosh.
They are les bad.
I've actually been to France and I don't really like Paris that much. Everyone's gonna drag me, but
I'm trans, so I don't have a passport, so
oh no. I do have a passport, but you can
check
do
your
that.
cis privilege, Michelle.
Yeah, that's my
Oh my God.
but that shit's expensive. If anybody's ever gotten a passport, that shit's unbelievably expensive. So, and traveling's a privilege, but like when I went to Paris, I was like, take back my passport. Like, blah. They're like racist and ableist, and they're just the worst. Anyways,
They also don't like Jews.
the French.
Yeah,
why am I not surprised though?
No, nobody really likes Jews. There's a long history of anti-Semitism in like every country.
Oh.
Especially European countries.
Well, I am gonna go ahead and start off by talking about not Jews, but
that's okay. We talk about Jews.
We can loop back.
We will eventually loop back to Jews.
Right. So, anyways, we are gonna talk about
Cinco de Mayo.
Cinco de Mayo.
Okay.
Yeah, so a lot of people kind of celebrate Cinco de Mayo in the U.S., and it's actually a little known fact.
Celebrate.
Yes, celebrate, which we will also talk about. It's actually a little known fact that most Mexicans do not celebrate Cinco de Mayo, and the reason for this is because it's not a very big holiday in Mexico. It was in commemoration of a battle that was fought in one particular place, Puebla, which was like victorious. It's actually a complicated result, but it's just one particular battle that was fought in like one particular spectrum of like many battles, and so it
was
eventually
a thing, people shot each other.
Yeah. And so people a lot of times like assume one that it's Mexican Independence Day, which is not. That's September 16th. And it is also not widely celebrated in Mexico at all. So, to give you a little bit of history about Cinco de Mayo, in 1861, Benito Juarez, who was the president of Mexico, basically was like, y'all, we don't have any more money to pay back to Europeans.
This sounds familiar.
Yeah.
It sounds like this has happened other times.
Yeah. Europeans, like
money.
They like to take
Steal
up money,
things,
resources, and they're colonizers, so like they really don't deserve any of that money in the first place. That money should not have been going there. But Benito Juarez was like, you know what, fuck y'all. And they had at this point accumulated debt with Spain, England, France, of course, and so he would just he declared financial insufficiency and was like,
Which is like old-timey bankruptcy.
Right, right. Old-timey bankruptcy.
Ye old bankruptcy.
And basically was like, fuck y'all, we're not paying you any more money. Honkies
leave.
Yeah, get the fuck out. And so at this point, France, again, the main villain of the story, was like, oh, hell no, we're going to use this as an opportunity to invade and, reclaim territory as like French territory, right?
France under Napoleon III, who was historically, if you know anything about Napoleon III is the worst Napoleon. He was very bad. He was very, very bad. Was not good at the name Napoleon. He wasn't even short. It was like, Napoleon III was not a very good ruler. And so he was like, these people owe me money. I'm going to go get my money, but with guns.
Right.
And a very long boat trip.
Yeah, and like, to be honest, at the root of it, yes, it was about the money, but France had been just kind of waiting for their opportunity to exploit. Yeah, and so they were really ready to go in, and they wasted all their money and resources making their way.
A little bit of buyer's remorse or seller's remorse from the Louisiana Purchase. We're like, we don't want this land that belongs to other people, but we say that we own. Take it. And then, 40 years later, they're like, maybe we did want the land after all.
And you know what? In terms of colonizers, all colonizers are fucking trash. But it takes, a special colonizer, like the French, to be, just bad at their job, which is colonizing, right? And the French have never really been great at, maintaining, control or,
no. At least not in the Americas.
Yeah. So the French come in, and they arrive at Puebla. And I made a little note card.
They tried it.
They tried to invade. So I underlined that tried. And
an effort was made.
And yeah, and it was cute. It was cute on their part. They did very much show up to Puebla.
They attended
the event. And
they clicked going.
So this is the funny part, right? Because they showed up with their artillery and their weapons and
the most advanced and well-equipped army in the world at this time belonged to the French Empire.
Yeah.
They were the beefy big boys after England had, done losing some colonial wars of their own recently.
So the French were very prepared. They had many more troops than the people in Puebla did. In fact, the local militia in Puebla was outnumbered 2-1, and they actually had to recruit indigenous locals to help them with this battle, which I think is really noteworthy, right? Because obviously, there's already overlap, there's indigenous overlap with Mexicans, but at this point, they started forming Mexican-American identities. And so you're seeing a unification of old school indigenous Mexicans, and then the new wave of Mexican Americans uniting to fight the French. So that's really fucking cool. So they brought this ragtag group of troops together to battle the biggest.
It was Mexican 300.
Yeah, yes, it was. We should actually make that into a movie. And we should call it
Puebla
300 or something. Wait.
Just call it Puebla.
Yeah, Puebla. And it has to be directed by Zack Snyder. And it has to be in slow motion. Actually, that's a terrible idea. I don't know, this is a horrible idea. But
We
yeah.
should be paid to do many things. Direct movies is not one of them.
Yeah, that was just an idea. I was just pitching.
It'd be a good movie, though, Mexican 300.
Yeah, Mexican 300. I would
Yeah.
go and watch that.
I mean, they've made how many Alamo movies? Like, come on.
And Alamo, like, I don't understand people
They
that
lost.
yeah, that's not even the
I mean,
best.
they lost in 300, too.
Yeah, well, they lost, but they
But
kept their
they-
dignity. They maintained their dignity, much like the Mexicans did.
Who actually won.
Yeah, and
So
that
this
was
is the one where, like, the people win. The people who are outnumbered win the thing.
right. And that's actually, you know, like, now I'm mad that they made 300 into a movie, but not
2 movies.
Yeah.
They had that shitty sequel.
We're not acknowledging the second one. But I'm mad that they haven't made a movie about Battle de Puebla because this is honestly like the true underdog story. And against all odds, they ended up like beating and defeating this highly equipped,
And trained.
yeah.
Moneyed French. They like literally drove them back into the sea. They're like,
Yes. And so, this became kind of like a symbolic victory for anti-imperialism and like, you know, there were several other battles that were fought and not all of them were victorious, but this one in particular was like important because it represented kind of like the tenacity of like fighting against imperialism and colonialism. And for the Mexican people, it became, or for the people of Puebla, right, it became a symbolic thing for them. But again, this was just one battle in many, many battles. And so it wasn't like a national holiday was like created and spawned from this because it really wasn't at that time considered like that critical in the grand spectrum of things.
well, there was a decree. There was like a decree of celebration that was issued. Wada said something. He was like, "Let's celebrate this because fuck the French."
Yeah.
And then like Mexican American folks in the west
region,
of what would then become what would later become the United States were celebratory because it gave them like an understanding of like nationalism sort of and like national pride, and they were like, "Hey, fuck the French!"
And this was like a really they had been taking a lot of L's, you know, so they really needed that victory. So that's why Benito Juarez was like, "Fuck yeah, like let's celebrate this." And what actually ended up happening as a result of that, right? Because there weren't, you know, like it wasn't like a holiday that was celebrated across all of Mexico, but Mexican Americans during like the Civil War and like
Civil War.
they like use this example, right, as a way to like inspire and bring, you know, that kind of same like story of inspiration to the people in the U.S. And that's when it actually became
like a thing.
Yeah. And so really it was like a minor kind of like, you know, sort of side little celebration in Mexico, and then it became like a huge thing in the U.S. And then it became a little bit different in the U.S.
Right. Well, it like sort of went underground for a little bit, and wasn't it like during the '60s, during the Chicano movement?
Yeah.
The alcohol companies figured out that like, yo, we could sell things for this.
Right. Yeah.
And they just started selling like tequila and Mexican beer.
I mean, they're selling Mexican culture across the board. But this is, you know, and this is what I say. It's like, I say this shit all the time. I think it's like, it doesn't bother me so much that people want to celebrate something that is a part of Mexican culture, right? I think there is a very distinct line between appreciation and like appropriation. And for me, like as a person who, you know, grew up with an undocumented mother, like seeing people kind of like take bits and pieces of like Mexican culture and consuming it and commodifying it in this fashion, all whilst like supporting an administration that wants to like build a wall and keep actual Mexicans out. Like it's fucking disgusting to me. And so like I have, you know, people are always like, why are you so mad? Like people are just trying to enjoy like our culture and like, you know, be a part of it. And it's like, no, but it's like at this point, and even at every point, you know, it's always been about more than just that, right?
Right.
And so
it's been like about this particular kind of commodification.
Yeah.
This like super, super white capitalist kind of commodification.
Yeah. And so you see, I mean, right now, like the way that Americans, right, or Americans, the people in the
White
U.S.,
people.
celebrate Cinco de Mayo is by like going out and putting on fucking sombreros and drinking tequila and
getting all sorts of the worst white girl wasted.
Yeah. And it's like, I can't help but be like bitter and angry about that. And I grew up feeling a lot of shame about like my Mexican roots. Like I'm mixed, right? I'm Mexican, Puerto Rican, but like I hid so much of like my Mexican identity growing up because I was like afraid and I was ashamed, and we were like in the spectrum of Latinidad, right? Like we're considered some of the like least exotic like versions of like Latinos because we're not from the Caribbean, you know what I mean?
Because
like,
you're accessible.
Right. Yeah. And so it's really interesting to see how like people love all these facets of like Mexican culture or Latino culture, and like they don't like to bring
Actual
everything
Latinos.
into the country. But yeah, so to kind of wrap up the history about that, eventually Juanito or
Benito Juarez.
Benito, yeah, I keep calling him Juanito.
Juanito Juarez.
Juanito. Benito Juarez was restored into power, and of course, celebration ensued.
Yeah.
Right?
As you do.
But yeah, it's actually really connected to like union struggles.
Oh god. Well, and it was also like the other thing that you got to understand about like France and like the time period is that this was the fucking beginning of the Civil War. And like for those of you who know Civil War history, the beginning of the Civil War was not pretty for the slightly less racist people, who were the Union, who were like, maybe we shouldn't own black people as property. Maybe we should just really, really badly mistreat black people in other ways. And the Confederates were like, no, we should own black people as property. That's totally what we should do.
Yeah.
And so that was like, because the Civil War was about slavery, and fuck everybody who says, oh, the Civil War was about states' rights. No, the Civil War was about slavery.
Yeah.
And so France, anti-black as fuck France, got a lot of their, imported a lot of cotton from the South. Like that was one of their major imports. They had a huge textile industry in France. And so their economy was taking a hit because the Union was blockading the Confederacy. And so the French were like, maybe this is not going to go so well for us, because they were trying to support the Confederacy so that they could have like better trade, and because they were also fucking racist assholes. And so like an underlying motivation for their invasion of Puebla was they were thinking, we'll run over these Mexican people and we'll like conquer up to the border. And we'll set up a base of operations through which to aid the Confederacy in the Civil War, funnel money, supplies, troops to the Confederacy, and help them, try to defeat the Union in the Civil War. And at the time that the Battle of Puebla happened, which was like 63, right?
1860.
It was 61 when he declared bankruptcy. It was 63 when the battle happened, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah,
I can double check. We will double check those stats for you. That's what we do in TacoBagel.
We fact check.
We fact check.
So but either way, the beginning half of the Civil War was not going so cute for the Union. They were losing a lot. They were going through generals a lot, and people in the North were starting to and. When we say the North, we also include the West, because the entire western part, like all the western colonies, 1862. 1862 was worse than 1863 for the Union. And so folks in the West were also sort of like very much had their stakes tied in with the Union. All the states in the West were not slave states. And so folks out West, including a very high Mexican-American population, were starting to worry about the South winning the war, because the South was winning the war at that point. And so when the Mexicans defeated the French at the Battle of Puebla, it sort of gave folks this indication like, maybe the Union can pull their shit together and actually win this war. Yeah. And it was one of actually the earliest turning points in the Civil War was the Battle of Puebla, because news in this spread throughout the U.S. and was really inspiring in the North to a lot of people who wound up joining the army. The Union actually got a small influx of reinforcements and new troop signups after the Battle of Puebla, because folks realized, maybe we can actually win this war and be slightly less worse to black people than we already are.
Yeah, and that was like so much of what was like symbolic
about
it in the U.S. and why it became such a huge thing that was celebrated here as opposed to like just in Mexico. Mm-hmm. But also, I thought it was really important that you brought up the fact that like the French had this like ulterior motive, right? Like they. again, it wasn't just about the money. They
It was
wanted
about racism too.
Right. It was about racism. They wanted to set up locations south of the U.S., right? And that's like Mexican territory.
They basically wanted to conquer, like, from the Mason-Dixon line to Guatemala with the Confederacy.
Right. And the U.S. was actually, after, throughout this, the U.S. was actually one of the forces that helped Mexico reinstate Benito Juarez. And the reason that they did that is because they also had ulterior motives. Right? Like, they also did not want the French setting up, like,
regime change,
right.
y'all.
So it was very, like, it's a global kind of situation that, like, comes or stems from a very small battle, but, like, had global impact or potential to have global impact. So it's really interesting to kind of, like, dissect some of that history and, like, look into the way that, like, it could have alternatively ended up.
It could have been bad.
Yeah.
This shit could have been really bad.
Could we theorize, maybe, that if...
alternate history is my shit.
Oh, my God. If, alternatively, they had lost Battle de Puebla, right? The Battle of Puebla had been lost, and the French fully regain control of...
What are we talking? Like, what kind of loss? Like,
so let's just say they lost that one battle, right?
Okay.
But what if, theoretically, it disheartened the spirits of the Mexican people
oh my God.
throughout the entire region, and story of the loss spread across?
Okay.
But also, like, in theory, right?
I'm looking up troop numbers. I'm getting, like, into this.
Right, okay. So, like, let's say, theoretically, that the French had actually been able to regain territorial control of the part you said set up between Guatemala and...
Well, their eventual goal when they were helping the South was to sort of, like, create this pro-slavery textile empire from, like, the Mason-Dixon line, which is Maryland, down to Guatemala.
Would we, like, as a U.S., would we have had the potential to have lost the Civil War?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Because the thing is with, it's not loading, whatever. I know a lot about Civil War history. I'm totally a history geek. It's from my former life as a person who was so depressed and mistreated that I only read history books for fun. I read history textbooks in my childhood was sad.
But also you could just read history. You don't have to, spiral to read history.
I didn't have to spiral to textbooks, and yet I did. But so the French, like, brought a lot of people to Puebla. Like, they brought, like, significant troops. They brought significant equipment. Like, this was no joke. This was, like, an actual invasion. Yeah. And so, like, theoretically, had the French defeated the Mexicans at the Battle of Puebla, they would have kept either conquering upwards towards the Mexican-U.S. border. Probably, like, they probably would have gone in through, like, they would have conquered up to Texas. Or they would have just set up a port in Puebla and, like, done the whole boat thing. So, like, Texas or Florida. But the other thing is that it would have opened the Confederacy and broken the blockade. Is the most significant thing, because the Union blockade of the Confederacy was actually one of the key reasons why the Union eventually wound up winning the war, because the Confederacy was stuck with the supplies that it had at the beginning of the war. Right. They weren't able to get more finances from France. They weren't able to get more materials, more ammunition from France. They weren't able to get anything. They just had what they had, and that was it. But had the French been able to conquer Puebla and broken that blockade, they would have basically been able to bring all the military and monetary might of France up through Mexico into the Confederacy, and the South would have won. There's no question.
Gosh. You know what this is? This is a real life version of Infinity War, where they have shield.
We've gone full circle.
Okay, I'm not gonna put any spoilers because I can't be assured that everybody has watched Infinity War, but there's like,
I know the part,
a scene, where there's like a shield around Wakanda, and there's a battle going on, but it's like that's the blockade.
Yeah,
right?
that was from the trailers.
It's really interesting that the French weren't able to, like, find any other alternative, like, route through this blockade. It's
the Union had a good navy, is the thing, because they had a better capacity to build ships, because one of the big disadvantages that the South had in the Civil War was that most of the industry was in the North. Yeah. And so the North could produce things like ironclad ships faster than the South could. Yeah. And so they had the strength initially to maintain this strong naval blockade of the Confederacy, which is ultimately what won them the war.
Yeah.
And the French couldn't try and break it because they would have basically had to sail their entire navy across the Atlantic Ocean to help out a foreign power win a civil war.
Right.
And this is like 1860s Europe. Like, a lot of people didn't like France at the time. Like, 1860s Europe was still very much like conquesty Europe.
Mm-hmm.
England would have totally invaded them. Like,
Yeah.
something would have happened had France just taken all their shit and gone.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why they didn't try to reinvade Puebla. Because when they lost the first time, France was like, all right, fuck it. South is on their own. We don't really care that much.
Yeah.
Like, this was a great economic opportunity for us, but we're out. We're not going to risk any more money or supplies or troops because they have their own country to defend.
Right. Yeah. I know that there were like other battles that they were more successful in or that they had some victory in, but it seemed like generally they ended up wasting
a lot of time and money and resources.
Resources, and they were just like, fuck it, like we're just cutting our losses. So, oh, thank you.
Yes!
Someone said yes to that top. Thank you.
I also say yes to that top.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I just put this little old thing on. No big deal. But yeah, I actually I wanted to do something that was like in the theme. And I didn't want to drink today, so I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna put on my cup, go in water. This is our first.
This is our first Taco Bagel where we're being healthy.
Yeah, this is our.
Oh wait, no, the hangover edition was healthy.
The coffee. There's nothing healthy about a hangover. There was a hangover edition. I'm getting old, so.
What?
Yeah. So,
oh my God, somebody celebrated with their French boss.
and asked, isn't this a sore spot for y'all? Didn't you lose? Oh yeah, so basically somebody in the comment section said that they celebrated Cinco de Mayo with their French boss yesterday and asked, isn't this a sore spot for y'all? Didn't y'all lose? You know what? I think every part of history is like a sore spot for like the French, to be honest.
They did not have, well, they had some good times and then they immediately stopped having those good times.
Forever.
I mean, there was like Napoleon and then there was Waterloo and it's been downhill from there.
Yeah.
After Waterloo, things did not go well for France.
There was Battle de Puebla. There was the Haitian Revolution. There was just France.
There was World War I. There was World War II. There was the rest of history.
Yeah. So.
Except for the American Revolution, but the American Revolution was before all this shit. That was before things started going bad for France. Things were going okay for France before that.
Spiraled into.
France used to be great. Like, they had Charlemagne, they had, like, the Frankish Empire, they, like, founded the Holy Roman Empire, essentially, which was neither holy nor Roman. Like, it was a French dude. But, they've fallen on hard times in the century or so since. Should have stuck to making furniture.
Well, and in terms of, like, European countries that are, like, effective and successful at colonizing, French had a pretty, like, solid start. A lot of their like the colonies that they wound up keeping a firmer grip on were in Africa. Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's because they had like direct access to them and didn't have to sail across the Atlantic Ocean.
That maybe that's it. Like, that's where all their families
the
are
French
coming
can travel
from.
well.
Yeah, they get seasick. Like, the French just don't have the stomach.
The baguettes don't last over the ocean.
They get cold and stale and crispy.
all the wine goes bad. All the baguettes go stale. The escargot is terrible by the time they get to America. They're like, we shall turn around. We will not fight this battle.
No. Yo, why does this episode end up on like a pro-French like site of some sort, and all the French get on their angry keyboard?
These Americans hate us.
But
I really love French people in Disney movies. That's what I will say.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Although Disney was a Nazi, so
The Little Mermaid.
So we got back to Jews.
But he's dead now, right? So like,
is he?
Oh my god. This is the part of Taco Bagel we like to call conspiracy theories. Is Disney dead? Is he still secretly controlling all the movies that are being made?
Who knows?
Well, my favorite French Disney character is definitely the cook from The Little Mermaid, because he never actually gets Sebastian.
No?
He just sings about it.
Sebastian's French, though, too.
No, he's Jamaican.
Oh, yeah. Who am I thinking of? Oh, I'm thinking of the Candelabra from Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah. He's a cute French character.
Yeah.
And his little dust girlfriend. His little...
Yeah.
So those are the positive images.
These are the positive images that I have of France. Are animated candelabras and stuff. He's been dead.
Janara, a fan, and
Friend of the show.
a friend of the show, would like to say he's been dead.
Would like to take a swing at debunking my very weakly based conspiracy theory that Walt Disney is not dead.
I mean, what are your?
Oh, that's it.
No, that's it. I'm like, all right.
It's the whole like frozen head thing.
Yeah, but like, you still need a functioning cognitive. Like,
that's not what Futurama tells us.
Oh my gosh, I love Futurama.
It's quality television. But like, yeah. So if the French had won the Battle of Puebla, the South would have won the Civil War. Like, no question about it. Like, it's just a historical fact. Like, the blockade would have been broken. It would have been bad news bears.
So in some ways, I feel like this is just like taking a new twist to the way we could celebrate. This is
Thank You Mexico Day.
Thank you, yes, thank you, and
again for doing the thing where you beat the French.
Oh my gosh! You should write a thesis on this. Like, we'll get together. We'll write a TacoBagel thesis. We'll publish it. But yeah, I think like the way that Cinco de Mayo is celebrated now is like drastically different than where it's gone from in its roots. But I don't know, like, I just feel some type of way about the way that the holiday has been, like, consumerized and, like, co-opted. Do you feel any type of way about, like, any particular holidays? Like,
I feel a lot of type of ways about all the different holidays.
All right. TacoBagel started because Steph and I both hate Christmas.
Yeah.
And actually, I feel like some of your sentiments about Christmas might echo some of my sentiments about
Cinco de Mayo. Really?
Yeah, because for you, it's like...
It's about Christian hegemony.
Yeah. And for me, it's about American hegemony on, like, a co-opted Mexican, like...
Oh, yeah, okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Although, I don't know. On holidays that I hate the most. What's the holiday you hate the most?
Oh, I hate a lot of holidays, just exactly equally.
Equally?
I mean, well, I can't really distinguish between, like, because I hate them all for different reasons. Because I hate Christmas a lot because of Christian hegemony.
Okay. I hate Christmas because I don't really have family, and I'm, like, bitter and, like, blah, like, I'm a Grinch. Yeah, we're Grinches.
We're professional Grinches. Grinch.
What was the other one?
I hate the 4th of July. For obvious reasons.
Okay, yeah. That's just another excuse to like get drunk and wear American flags.
Right. It's everybody's best excuse to like wear their ugliest clothes.
Yeah.
I
don't really celebrate Thanksgiving. Although every time
you don't celebrate eating.
I don't celebrate the massacre of indigenous people.
No, neither do I. I just celebrate eating. I like eating.
I do. I always get invited to people's homes, and everyone's always like, "Oh, what we're really celebrating
is eating.
Is being thankful for one another." And I'm like, I'm just here for the food.
Holidays suck when family sucks. Seconded.
Yes, and that's probably why I'm such a Grinch about all holidays.
Right. This is like one of the underlying themes of TacoBagel is we just really both hate our families.
We hate our families. We hate holidays. We drink lots of wine, and we hate the cops.
We're the model queer millennials.
Yeah. Oh my god, we're like one of those annoying like buzzword like motherfuckers. Like, the ones that like the baby boomers always complain about that like have eliminated chain restaurants and
right. We killed Denny's.
We killed Denny's. It's Applebee's next, isn't it?
I don't know. I'll let Applebee's stay until last. They have good boneless wings.
Applebee's?
Yeah.
Applebee's? Oh wait. Maybe I'm thinking of like Friday.
Maybe you're thinking of Chili's. I like how we've just completely changed, and people are still watching. They're watching us talk about like why we hate like restaurants and holidays.
I mean, yeah, we kind of. I feel like we laid out some of the history of Battle de Puebla really well, and we theorized about the
alternate history. Yeah, we would have all just been like the Confederacy one.
Yeah, and I also wrote an article about it. I posted it up on the TacoBagel page if you just want to look at the citations for some of this stuff.
Some quality writing.
Yeah, it's all right. It's okay. It's just history. But yeah.
History is quality writing.
It is quality writing, but what would be really quality writing is we wrote an alternative history.
Well, I'm sure somebody has. Mexicans.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my, you know that whole thing, like, history is written by the victors. That like, that's not even true. Like, Mexicans didn't get to decide how people celebrated Cinco de Mayo. It's
Right.
History is written by the most proximitous white people to the victors.
Yeah, because Mexicans, it's so funny because, like, my relatives and such will be like, oh, wow, like, people really, like, they love that shit out. Like, they're kind of confused about it. Like,
what's up?
Yeah, what does that mean to you? Like,
Really?
Which I can understand their confusion. Like,
I also very much understand their confusion.
Yeah.
For me, it's just figure out which one of my white friends are still racist day.
Yeah, that's true. It is a good vetting process. I will say that.
It's a built-in vetting process. In the middle of the year, right before we get into Pride season, you get to figure out, like, who is what kind of racist.
Right. And there's, like, it's like almost like levels of racism, right? Like, there's like, all right, I'm going to go out and celebrate this holiday and drink tequila, which is like annoying, but not yet racist.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's like, I'm going to walk around in a fucking sombrero and a poncho and a fake mustache.
Which is basically just brown face at that point.
Right, which is basically pretending that you're like what you think, the version of
the
what
most
you think.
ridiculous stereotype.
And that shit happens a lot, like, around Halloween, too. Like,
Ooh.
You'll see, like, the commodifications of someone's culture and the way that people wear it as, like, a costume. And we have this conversation a lot about how there is a difference between cultural appreciation and cultural appropriation.
Right.
And obviously, it's not set in stone. There's not, like, a defined line. But I can tell you when I see something and explicitly feel, like, some type of way about it, it's because I see this reductionist version of, like, a very complicated, beautiful, nuanced culture put into, like, a simple package,
Put into, like, a shitty party store sombrero.
Yeah. And
a plastic mustache.
Yeah, and that's what Cinco de Mayo is, like, the way it's celebrated now is that's amplified, right?
Right.
Like, it's like, all right, like, and so I'm I'm a new woman this year, so I'm not out throwing hands the way that I used to.
Okay,
yeah, no, because I think it was last year, the year before, I was literally out. I think maybe even days before Cinco de Mayo, people were already in their fucking sombreros and shit. And I, like, ran up on some people. I was like, yo. I ran up on this white girl, and I was like, yo. I was like, what are you doing? I was like, you should be ashamed of yourself. And I was, like, pretty, like, contained. It wasn't like I ran up and, like, punched her in the face or anything.
But she's a white girl, so you may as well have.
I mean, I'm not trying to catch a case. Like,
right, but you talk to her, and to white women, if you talk to white women, that's the same thing as punching us in the face.
Well, what she ended up doing,
Oh, God.
because she, like, was very shook by my behavior, because it wasn't, I was very more like, I'm disappointed, like, like a parent, like,
I'm disappointed in you.
Like, I didn't know.
How could you, Jennifer?
Yeah. Okay, Allison. Like, but basically, I was just like, like, this is a commodification of, like, a part of a culture. And so she went and got her Latino
allergic
friend.
to white people, sorry.
You're allergic to yourself?
I'm allergic to goyim. All right, fine. Non-Jewish white people. I'm allergic.
Okay. But, yeah, she ended up, like, grabbing her Latino friend.
Oh, no.
Which was, like...
Oh.
So
this is worse than I expected.
Yeah, her, like... And this is what I said. I said this the other day, and I'll say it again. I don't give a fuck if your most paisa, banda-loving, fucking wearing cowboy boots every day Mexican friend runs up and is like, you can do this. You can go out and wear this mustache and sombrero and, like, get drunk. Like, I give you permission. Because, like, we're not a fucking monolith. And, like, not one person doesn't speak on behalf of the entire population.
Right.
And, like... And
there hasn't been a vote.
Yeah. So it's like, are you going to take that chance? Like, are you going to take that fucking chance? Yeah, it's always like, oh, my Latino friend. First of all, this is not a Latino holiday. This is a Mexican holiday. Oh, one.
Oh, my God. How many people out there have, like, their Panamanian friends being like, oh, yeah, this is totally fine?
Yeah, I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's a really
So let me vet your friend, and let me punch you.
Let me have a word with your friend. Yeah, I actually don't give a fuck if your friends co-sign and all of this shit, because... That's not, that's just not how the Mexican delegation works. We all get together and we have a vote on shit.
Oh, God.
But, like, these are just fucking things that, like, come up around this time of the year. And it's obviously, like, it's something that we can, like, have conversations around and we can, like, talk about it with our friends. I think that's, like, the most I can explain to someone, or the best way I can, like, resonate with
Right.
someone is just by like saying
Explaining
like, look,
it,
yeah. So yeah,
You know, it's really interesting actually, because you know how as mainstream, as like regular liberalism has become mainstream, we have people like Francesca Ramsey doing like snarky little video shows on MTV, and like people who like regular white people will be like, aha, you have a point on the internet.
yeah,
And like these really consumable like 2-minute videos teaching people how not to be racist on specific days where they're usually racist.
yeah.
It's really interesting to me how Cinco de Mayo is going to look in a couple of years when like what is the like attitude towards the racism going to look like, and what is the actual racism going to look like? Because I don't think I have enough confidence in white people to trust that we're going to learn to not be racist from Francesca Ramsey. Like, as great as Francesca Ramsey is, I don't think that, she's like this panacea to white people.
Yeah.
Nor is that her job.
Yeah.
But
I mean, it kind of.
Well, I mean, it's actually her job.
She explains. She does really great
do
videos. She does a really good job of explaining things in a very short period of time.
Like a very internet consumable way.
Yeah.
But it's going to be really interesting to me to see what Cinco de Mayo is going to look like. Like, is it going to move away from the like overtly like costume store racist sort of stuff and move into like what we see with bars and businesses having like kind of racist themed promotions?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what it's going to look more like, and then we have to teach people consumer activism too, or is there going to be like this really stark divide between people who obviously don't care? Like, oh yeah, I'm gonna wear my sombrero and my mustache and my poncho, ha 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 ha. And then people who are like, you should not do that. Yeah. Take that off, Jonathan.
I think there's always gonna be that. There's always gonna be those people that like just don't care about it, and like that's not really like the people I'm trying to talk to or convince.
Right,
really
because they're a waste of time.
Right, and I'll hold them just as accountable. I'll still be like, yo, you're fucking trash for this. But I think more than that, it's like, speaking to your point, it's like, this is just one facet of like racism that like, for example, Mexicans experience. And like, I want to be really clear about this. Like when we talk about keeping people out, keeping undocumented people out, right? There's a spectrum of undocumented people, not just Latinos. Like there are Black folks, there are, people like... There's
like European and Canadian undocumented people.
Yeah, who get profiled less, but still like undocumented.
You hear about it every now and then.
Yeah. And so it's like, when we're talking about racism and the way that it takes shape and form, it's like, this wouldn't, to me personally, right, and I'm only speaking for myself, this wouldn't bother me as much if it wasn't backed up by this racist legislation and racist administration and racist policies. Because, like, for me, it's a slap in the face when you have people that want and love and uplift parts of your culture, but also want to keep the fundamental parts of your culture, which are the people, out, right? And so it's like, what is that conversation going to be like? When I'm talking to someone about the commodification of like a holiday, right? Like the Cinco de Mayo, I want to make sure that I'm talking about why, right? Like why this is not just a problem superficially, but why it's a problem like across the board,
right?
As like, a country that has promoted racism at its structure,
And like, how dare you commodify Mexican culture while simultaneously devaluing Mexicans as people?
Right. Yeah, and that should always be, I think, a talking point whenever we're talking about appropriation, right? Because at the root of it, it's like so many things at this point have been like appropriative, and like that conversation gets really blurry, right? Like it gets really complicated.
Most things are stolen from somebody.
Right. Yeah, and I think I was having this conversation with someone at one point. I was like, Left Book loves to gatekeep, right? And sometimes, y'all, like, we gotta pick our fucking battles. Like, we love to gatekeep shit, and like that's fair and it's fine because like you said, so much of culture has been stolen. But I think we need to be really intentional about what we choose to take on, and that's why I'm saying, like, at the root of it, Cinco de Mayo, superficial, it's stupid. Like, I'm not gonna go around punching every white person in the face. I just don't have the time, and I don't have the mental energy. Yeah. But like, I will have conversations with people because of the way that like our administration is upholding the racism against Black and brown people right now, right? And like, to me, that's more important than having that conversation. Like, fine, drink your tequila. But when undocumented people are being pushed out of this country, I better see you like show out.
Better see you making Molotov cocktails out of those tequila bottles.
Right. Yeah. And when there's no more tequila left, like, like Right now, I think even I was joking about this, that I had to go all the way to fucking Whole Foods to get some avocados this week. And, like, this is like a joke, right? It's a joke because, like, I gotta go to the whitest fucking place to just get some fucking avocados. But also, this is, like, a real problem. Right. That the, like, access to, like, a certain, foods, like avocados.
As soon as white people are like, it's a superfood.
Yeah, it's becoming harder and harder for indigenous people to get access to that.
The same thing with quinoa.
Yes, yeah. And it's
or
like
quinoa, if you can't pronounce things.
Who says quinoa?
People who have never heard somebody pronounce quinoa.
What? Oh my god. No, please, no.
Don't, it's not quinoa.
It's quinoa.
Quinoa. No, it's quinoa.
No, so yeah, I don't know, yeah.
That's some shit, like.
And this is like not just for food; it's also for things like in indigenous communities, like Native folks are having harder times accessing like stage, things like that, which.
Or like white people who are like, I'm a witch.
Yeah. Like right now, that's like a big thing. It's like traditional like witch culture is.
See, that's probably the thing that I've seen the most recently is white people just straight up stealing brujeria. Like, and they're like, oh, I'm a witch, I'm pagan, it's okay.
Brujeria or like voodoo or
like mystical things that like aren't, because there's a very long and storied tradition of like European witchery. Like, it's not like white people don't have something to fall back on for this.
Yeah.
Like there is a long tradition of witches in Europe that white people, if you want to like do your thing and be a witch, like, cool. There's white people witches that have been around for fucking centuries.
I mean, most of them died. Most of them
not saying they ended well. Not saying that any of them had a good time. But
if you read history,
there's stuff there. You don't have to steal it from like Creole people or like Mexican people. Like there's accessible culture available.
Yeah.
And yet we see so many white people doing like just straight up stealing.
Yeah. And like, you know, it's like brujeria and like stuff like that is like a very like secular like part of like a culture, right? But like when you're talking about more mainstream things like sage, for example, in indigenous communities, there's like a very special types of sage that are like specific to like very sacred rituals. And so when people, colonizers come in and find that they really like the way sage smells in their house, right? Like they're buying up access to things that people use for sacred purposes.
Right.
And so, yeah, it just becomes like this really kind of ugly co-optation of like someone's like traditional rituals and culture. And when you're restricting access to someone, like, right, like how much harm are you really doing?
Right. It'd be like, you know, if suddenly, for some reason, black people decided they really wanted to like just put communion wafers in everything.
You know what? I have enough faith that like the Catholic hegemony, right, is so strong that there will always be enough wafers.
I see that's a question. Like, could somebody outconsume the production of communion wafers just to make a point? Could a community do that just specifically to make this point?
Could Jewish people do that?
No, there's not enough Jewish people. I don't know. Numerically, there aren't enough Jewish people to outconsume Catholics and communion wafers.
I think the only people that could give religiously, maybe Muslims. There's enough Muslims.
There are enough Muslims.
All right, yeah, we've gotten really off topic. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at right now. If you want to loop back and watch the beginning of the video where we talk more about the history of Battle de Puebla, and we talk Cinco de Mayo and the reasons that it was celebrated, you will be able to do that as soon as we finish up in a bit. But I kind of want to wrap it up. I feel like...
Well, I think there's one more thing that we should really talk about. And it's happening right now, is these really massive protests in Puerto Rico. Where like the Puerto Rican people are being treated like shit by their government and by the U.S. government and by like the international community, who like refused to help them after Hurricane Maria.
And the U.S.
Hurricane Maria, and then like the other hurricane that came right after that. I forgot the name of that one.
Yeah. And the U.S. has halted like it multiple like
everything.
Yeah, it's a halted aid in a lot of different like sectors of like the the help that they were supposed to be giving to the U.S. because they were supposed to be giving it to Puerto Rico because Puerto Rico is a part of the U.S., right? Like it's a
colonized territory,
Yeah, and the U.S. has been, or the U.S. administration has been really unhelpful to the people.
Just like generically shitty.
Yeah, and they've lost like power on the island, and so the people are just fucking fed up.
Right, as they should be.
Yeah.
But there's this thing that's happening right now where there's these like unmarked military personnel roving around these protests and like acting as a private police force, and nobody can figure out where they're from. This is like this basically foreign military intervention in Puerto Rico to quell these protests, and it really like we're talking about all this stuff with like Battle de Puebla and how France just rolled up in there with the French army and foreign military intervention trying to help the South win the Civil War. It like I don't know. It feels fishy to me. Like it feels like there's a historical comparison that can be made between, you know, not necessarily the larger Civil War context, but this specific instance of like how there's foreign military intervention right now in Puerto Rico, where clearly this is some sort of naked attempt by like developers and rich people in the U.S. to devalue property in Puerto Rico so deeply that eventually when like the Puerto Rican people can't keep protesting or something happens, they're just going to buy up all the land and force Puerto Rico into statehood.
Yeah. It's like global similar. Gentrification. That's what it seems like, because people are still like actively vacationing out there. Like they're still, because everything's so cheap right now. Like there's so much access to Puerto Rico because people are, you know, struggling. They're struggling for survival. But it's outside access. It's like everyone can still go and go on vacation. And it's, you know, really unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. And
it's becoming like Jamaica in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't.
Well, the tourist situation.
Right,
The tourist situation is becoming like Jamaica in a lot of ways.
And to be honest, I mean, that issue is like a thing that happens with black and brown countries in like warm places a lot, right? Like the Caribbean. I was recently in Haiti. I was in Haiti last year. And they have the same kind of like, you know, there's like this consumerist, like tourist culture that is very separated from the way that people live there. And it's put so much of like their income banks on that tourism. So it's just, unfortunately, like Puerto Rico is just going through like a really difficult time. And there were the protesters that just got like accosted, like the police force there and then the unmarked police. And there were like children who got like pepper sprayed in the face. So if this is something that you haven't read about or you haven't looked into, definitely.
It's like a little bit of an urgent situation right now.
Yeah, and we can even do some research on places or organizations that are collecting volunteers or money or things like that, that you might be able to
check out if you're in Chicago, the Puerto Rican Cultural Center.
And there's also going to be a Puerto Rico protest happening in Chicago
soon.
Yes, I believe, is that Monday, Puerto Rico? Do you remember?
I think Monday sounds right.
Like Free Puerto Rico or
what's Monday gonna? Monday's the 7th. Yes, I think it's going to be Monday.
And we can
check just in case.
Jonathan said there are so many ads saying Puerto Rico open for business. There's nothing short of gentrification. Many non-Boricuas are moving into Puerto Rico just like Katrina. And that's like the perfect parallel. Like Katrina really like
fucked up New Orleans.
Yeah, and even now to this day, like New Orleans is still like suffering the aftermath. And there's this movement right now where Airbnb renters in New Orleans are basically like driving people out of their like homes. Like there's heavy gentrification along with like the yearly Mardi Gras celebration, you know. So it's like right now there's a lot of really fucked up things going on around the world. So we're gonna try to set up some links, post some information about that, and then follow up on it to see if
we were just talking about that.
Yeah. So we'll definitely put up some links and we'll put some resources for people who are interested in learning more. And
we're hoping to start resuming our regular TacoBagel schedule from this point forward.
Yes.
No, hopefully no more month-long breaks.
Yeah, Steph has left us for a month, but now she's back. So
I'm back from beyond the grave / the East Coast.
So yeah, we might have a special episode coming up. We don't, we'll let you guys know what it's about. We'll have another featured guest on. But
might be something fun.
Yeah,
it will be something fun, but it might be something extra fun.
Right.
All right.
The most fun. All right. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for watching. Remember to like the video, share the video, go onto our YouTube page where we have past episodes. Give us, give our videos some views, drop some likes, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and spread the word about the goodness of TacoBagel, the savory goodness of TacoBagel.
I'm gonna go to taco right now. Somewhere that's not here.